Welcome to another Film Critters Throws It Back.
Film Critters Throws It Back.
Today, we're throwing it back with Scream, the Wes Craven classic.
Scream! So yeah, we ran another poll, which was movies that I haven't seen yet. Scream was the poll winner.
Specifically, movies Baru hasn't seen.
Yeah, movies specifically I have not seen yet that are like... Specifically, like the general idea for the prompt is like movies that you like bring up with people and they're like, oh my god, you haven't seen that. And Scream is like a really big one for me on that front.
I was surprised that Back to the Future didn't make it, just because that was actually what prompted it, was Robbie being like, you haven't seen Back to the Future.
Yeah, no, I've also never seen any of the Back to the Future movies. Or the first Terminator, even though I've seen Terminator 2 and 3 somehow.
I can't believe I haven't seen Terminator 3, and I love Terminator. But you have now seen...
I have now seen the first
Scream
movie, and hey, it's a good movie.
Yeah, it turns out it's a classic for a reason. It got 3 sequels and a TV series that I don't think anyone likes to talk about the TV series.
Okay, fair enough.
The main thing I remember from anything about it was everyone making fun of a scene where a character is getting stabbed to death, and she's like Instagramming or like she's like Facebook status update about it, like, oh, I'm getting stabbed to death, OMG, frowny face, or something like that.
Oh, it's one of those.
Yeah, it was like, hey, teens this day. Teens these days.
Teens be getting killed this day and age.
Teens, it's being like, I'm dying, and the only thing a teen be thinking about is like, how could I put this on Vine?
How can I Insta this?
Oh, I'm gonna live stream to Twitter bait. But Scream is not that.
Scream is not that. Scream is very... So, I've seen a lot of movies that people have kind of claimed were, like, horror deconstruction. I've seen Cabin in the Woods, which I thought was kind of a piece of shit.
Oh, it's not good.
Yeah, no, it's... Sorry once again, Josh.
Josh Whedon.
But I kind of just thought it was really up its own ass and really self-referential. In a way that, like, this movie... Scream is kind of like self-referential, but like, I think the kind of crucial thing about Scream is that it's kind of it kind of has this element of just like, yeah, but this shit's for dorks.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and the thing that I was like, the thing I like about Scream versus Cabin in the Woods is that Cabin in the Woods does not work as a horror film.
Yeah.
Like, it is not it only works as a satire and as like a goofy comedy, but you're not really scared at any point or stressed out, especially because they have the killers revealed so soon and because it's so like hokey. And I think you could have taken the concept of Cabin in the Woods and done it in like that sort of way.
Absolutely.
But Scream is like both really funny and also like really stressful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Scream is first and foremost an actual horror film.
Yeah. So to preface, Jay, you're like a big fan, or would you say that you're a big fan of the Scream series?
Oh, no, I love the Scream series. I hadn't actually seen 3 until recently, but I had seen 1, 2, and somehow 4 without seeing 3.
Okay. That's fun.
But then I re-marathoned them recently, and I was just like, oh, wait, I actually forgot that, like, this is, like, a great series. 2 and 3, like, obviously are, like, the weakest, and I think I would argue that 2 is worse than 3, but overall, like, I think it's actually like a really great series, and I really like the way in which it is commenting on itself and the way in which it uses the tropes of horror genre and draws attention to those, but it does those in a way to like misdirect the audience, which is partially what makes 2 the weakest, is that it doesn't do that as well, and the ending is like the killer reveals are like, oh, oh, it is that killer. Okay.
Well, the sequel's always the worst one. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think I do want to loop around and talk about all of the feelings that I had on what the movie was saying about like trauma and paranoia and all of these other things, because I think there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah. Like the scene when she's when it's Jamie Kennedy and Matthew Lillard outside, and she's like not sure which one is telling the truth and which one is real.
Yeah.
And so she just says like "fuck you" and closes the door.
Yeah,
but that ends up being the wrong choice as well.
yeah, absolutely. But like prior to that, the only there's a lot of actors in this movie. I kind of knew about the beginning, sort of, as far as like less about the Drew Barrymore thing, her just kind of being like a bit part, but I guess more sort of the like preamble of the movie. I did not know how long it was. It
surprises you every time.
Yeah, it's like this kind of cool like mini sort of psychological like Hush style movie that happens at the beginning of Scream, and really like seeing Ground Floor like outside of any parody work or anything like that, because obviously, you know, a lot of spawned a lot of parody work and shit like that, which is another thing we can touch on. But like it I really appreciated the like beginning sequence and like seeing it and just like seeing all of it like from the actual movie, just because I've seen so many Scream references everywhere.
I didn't even think about the fact that like that scene is just like parodied so much that it's like, oh, but when you actually watch it, you're like, oh, there's a reason it is, which is because it's a very, very well crafted like just scene.
It's really memorable. And it's really memorable. Like the thing that you told me about how they like she's on the cover of the DVD.
Like the actual main character. I'm gonna grab the DVD case to point out. The actual main character of the movie is the big spooky face in the background.
You can't even tell though,
and you can't tell it's Neve Campbell. And Drew Barrymore is just foregrounded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh wait, maybe actually that might be Neve Campbell. That might be her friend. Whose name I'm blanking on.
Okay.
Tatum is what her character's name is, but I don't remember the actress offhand.
Mm.
But yeah, no, they definitely like Drew Barrymore is the largest character on the poster.
Yeah,
definitely was pushed in as sort of like she's the star, she's the big name star we all know.
Yeah,
and then they just kill her in the first in the first opening.
Yeah, I thought that was fun. And another quick shout out. I'm really hesitant to kind of put a spotlight on a cop character, but I think I can make an exception for a small town deputy. Dewey is so cute.
I'd forgotten until the movie started, and then as soon as Dewey showed up, I was like, oh yeah, Dewey's like a Baru type, like just like that, like bimbo, but not like fully hunkified bimbo, just like dumb dog. Like,
listen. Anyway, but yeah, no, I really loved him. And I didn't super love Gail. I didn't really get what they were going for as far as, I don't know. She's Tsundere. Yeah, she's so Simpson. When she like treats her assistant like shit, and then he gets killed and like is on top of her van, and she's just like, oh, get off my van, and like flings him off by like breaking her life. Like, she's a little bit cynical, but I don't know.
She is supposed to be like, yeah, like a super cynical character.
Right.
She gets better as the series goes on, and I think to be fair, it's because like this movie is also sort of like a character arc for her, because when it starts out, she's like literally exploiting tragedy.
Yeah,
like absolutely. That is how her character is introduced, is that she exploits tragedy.
Yeah, but then she like has this involvement in like the tragedy or whatever.
Yeah,
like later in the film,
and then ends up being like the person who saves the person she was exploiting earlier in the film.
That's interesting. I hadn't really put that together. I just watched it, by the way.
We literally just popped it out the DVD tray, popped it out the PS4, put it back in the disc thing, and then started recording.
We watched the DVD That's how you know we're fucking real.
It's unfortunately the Dimension Collectors series, so it was that weird letterbox thing. So it was like widescreen, but like smaller widescreen and a big black square.
Listen, I watch movies with VHS tracking and extremely bad formatting.
No, this is every time I watch this film, there's like new things about it I notice. It's a very densely packed film with like a lot of set pieces that kind of need to be put together. Like, just that final act. Like, just the execution of that, of like how you're gonna have both characters, are like the fact that there are two killers revealed.
Yeah.
And where everyone needs to be and where people need to be like placed to like come in and out of like those scenes and like various reveals that happen and various like bits that are set up with the running joke of having like Halloween playing, which then becomes commentary where like Jamie Kennedy is watching it and saying, Jamie, look out behind you, as the killer is behind him. And then like one scene later, characters are watching that because it's on a delayed footage and saying, look out behind you to him. The bit where like she pushes the TV over as like Jamie Lee Curtis in the movie is stabbing Mike Myers, so she's killing the other killer.
Really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of like it's a film I really love just on like the level of like thought and craft work that has to go into putting it all together. And it's also really campy. It's also very intentionally campy.
No, I really ended up loving the sort of camp aspect of it. It really reminded me of Heathers. Where it doesn't really necessarily feel like a living, breathing world, but it kind of just feels like you're in, I guess, somebody's dream or somebody's vision, or just kind of this like political cartoon version of like a world that, I don't know, that is a style of filmmaking that I kind of used to hate, but now I'm like really into this sort of like very subjective, sort of very scripted,
very stylized,
kind of,
exactly, like, way of interacting. And it's so for me it's definitely like a twofold thing, and we're gonna keep bringing up the trauma thing, and just as a teaser, at some point down the line I want to do a Film Critters about the Scream quadrilogy and how it relates to the idea of intergenerational trauma, because of the main focus in the whole series being Sydney's relationship to her mother who was murdered. And how that becomes a recurring theme, and also like her relationship to her own traumas and how they keep being revisited over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be super interested in that.
So in that regards, I see like that sort of stylization as sort of like a double feat, like multiple layers where it's like, one, Sydney is the person who isn't like that at all. And it's this sort of idea of like everyone around her is just sort of insensitive to like the fact that her mother was murdered, because they don't really have the emotional script to handle it. So they just handle it like they handle like, Becky got a hand job. Ha ha ha. Sydney's mom was brutally murdered. Ha ha ha. Like they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And also like it works into sort of the general commentary of the film about like how horror movies are just so like a part of like the language of like teenagers, especially teenagers in the 90s and going forward, where it's like so many of them grow up with it, and like with so thoroughly knowing the tropes and rules of it and like the sort of cynical ways about it, that even like in a movie where people are being murdered in real life, because it feels like a horror movie, they default to treating reality like a horror movie.
Yeah.
And then also like contrast that with the way in which like Wes Craven makes the violence in this feel like very visceral.
It's really, I was kind of shocked by it, actually.
Especially because like in parodies of it and sort of stuff, and like the ways in which it's become a part of the consciousness, I feel like a lot of people remember the violence as being sort of usual slasher movie violence, but it's not. It's actually like pretty brutal, like uncomfortable violence. Yeah.
There's a lot of, I don't know, maybe I just haven't seen quite a handful of slasher movies lately, but it really gets, it's just this weird sort of gut-wrenching kind of violence, especially toward the end when Matthew Lillard and the other actor's character, like
Skeet Ulrich.
Skeet Ulrich, yeah.
Jughead's dad.
Jughead's fucking dad.
We could just call him Jughead's dad.
That's what we're gonna call him from now on. But yeah, when Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard are stabbing each other toward the end of the movie, it's like you kind of do, the camera's kind of like stationary, and like you see the knife go in, like air quotes, like actor terms go in. And like it's just really I don't know, it feels kind of uniquely confrontational.
It's Matthew Lillard's like acting in that scene is so good because it's like he's just playing this like manic, just fucking weirdo character, and he's just but like slowly kind of like being overcome with like the fact that he's being stabbed and bleeding out, and he's just like starting to like spit his words out more uncomfortably, and like both of their movements becoming just more like garish and grotesque. It's like the first time I remember watching this movie, I remember that scene. I was like, this is like severely uncomfortable to watch. Like just these like dudes just maniacally stabbing each other and laughing and like trying to continue playing up this cartoon role that they've given themselves while they're like basically bleeding out. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, but I also really liked that whole sequence in a way that like I think a lot of movies have kind of tried to parody it specific examples being like Funny Games, which we might talk about in the near future for Film Critics. Shh, don't tell anybody.
It's your secret.
And there was another example that I had thought of with like just a lot of examples of kind of omniscient, campy murderers. But I really liked how their sort of like motives were handled.
I was actually gonna say, yeah, because like I remember you pointed out the unusual parallel between this and like Funny Games, where there's like the whole bit of like it's the millennium, like you don't need motives anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It was straight out of Funny Games,
and like they have motives like somewhat, but then at the same time, it's like those motives are also like very clearly in the universe and by the characters treated as like secondary.
Yeah,
because it's like, yeah, he has a motive for killing Sydney's mom, but he doesn't have a motive for becoming a serial killer. He just does, and then he makes a joke about it. He's like, absent mothers like cause like deviant behavior.
Yeah,
but it's like his mom left like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Like that's obviously a bullshit excuse.
Yeah, yeah. It's this really great sort of, and just Matthew Lillard's whole arc of just being like, just kind of parroting all this like annoying, like it's the millennium, you know, you don't need motive, blah 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 blah. And then like as soon as he's like realizes he's dying, he's just like, I'm just a sensitive person. I'm just peer pressured. It wasn't my idea. And so the other thing about the movie, touching on like trauma and like paranoia and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff where they play with what's the name of that main character actress?
Neve Campbell. The character's name is Sydney.
Okay. There's a lot of stuff where Neve Campbell's character kind of like she has like outbursts and stuff like that. Like she has some sort of line like, sorry for being so traumatized.
Yeah, she has a lot of outbursts. She has like the one line where she's like, "Oh, sorry for being so traumatized."
Yeah,
where she screams at Skeet Ulrich because he's like, "Oh, you should just get over your dead mom. Like, come on. Like, I want a nut."
Yeah, I want to get my nut in, and you're over here complaining about your mom who died a whole 1 year ago.
Speaking of, I really loved, like, the reason when I came back at one point was like, oh, did they went over the virgin rule, right? And you're like, yeah. It's like I wanted to bring that up and have it fresh in your mind.
Yeah,
because I really like how that like reveal that he slept with Sydney so that she wouldn't be a virgin, so that he could kill her because of horror movie laws. I love how that just projects such a sinister vibe to him trying to have sex with her the whole film.
Yeah.
Is that the entire time he's been trying to have sex with her, it's so that he could kill her.
Ugh.
Like I said, it's a surprisingly dense film for like a late 90s, early 2000s horror film.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much. I found that there was a lot of kind of, I guess, like gender stuff happening. I'm sure that people have talked themselves blue in the face over it. But I do think that there's like kind of an aspect of like there's this weird thing being played with of like you can't really trust boys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you caught that thematically at all.
Yeah, I know, because like they even set that up a little bit with the line about like, oh, it has to be a man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they have this whole thing. And there's just a lot of like a lot of the main character, like you kind of see how her kind of like walls go up, and how her like trauma kind of affects her interactions with especially with like men, like with her boyfriend, and you see how it kind of prevents her from like from being able to do certain things, or like it just kind of it really affects her life and how she interacts with like everybody around her. And then the movie like makes a really good point of just kind of like I guess taking advantage of that, putting a pin on her trauma.
Yeah.
In a very sort of elegant way.
No, they very much so like make a point to make the point that she is traumatized by virtue of like by virtue of just like her mother's murder, and just like that she has a trauma around like men's violence. Like this is a film that ends up touching very pointedly on men's violence, which is also very self-aware because that's a big point of analysis in horror.
Yeah, absolutely. So did Wes Craven? I'm kind of having difficulty remembering specifically what he's done. I think I remember Wes Craven did Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes, he did Nightmare on Elm Street. He's done a lot. I'll pull up a full list.
Okay, yeah. Did he do Halloween, or was that somebody else?
No, that is John Carpenter.
John Carpenter. Okay.
Shout outs to John Carpenter for letting them use. His full name was Wesley Earl Craven.
Oh.
I don't know why. That's just really funny that his full name includes Earl. He has famously done Nightmare on Elm Street and the Scream series are like his two big ones, because those have like, you know, like like figures that are like well known from them.
Yeah.
But he's also done Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes are his like two of his other like really big like famous horror films.
Okay.
And then just like a lot like a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
I'm seeing if there's anything else. Oh, I forget he also did Deadly Friend, which if you haven't seen, and if you at home haven't seen, it's an 80s horror film that is basically Wes Craven loves deconstruction is the thing I've noticed. Deadly Friend is basically a deconstruction of the whiz kid genre of movie, like not like a horror film, where it takes that sort of thing and it makes it a horror film where it's like the whole point is like, I'm a boy genius and there's the girl next door and I love her. And she's like, they're both like kids and like she's like being abused and she gets killed. So he reanimates her corpse and like brings her back to life. But she's like a monster. She's like a robot that like kills people now. And it's just like, and it's just the whole thing is like framed in like the visual and like tonal language of like that sort of whiz kid, like Johnny Five, like sort of kids movie. And it's just like an upsetting horror film about a boy resurrecting his murdered, abused neighbor into like a robot.
That sounds fucking sick.
It is a really good movie and I super recommend it. I know he also did New Nightmare, was supposed to also be like a kind of like self-aware way of like taking self-aware look at the original Nightmare on Elm Street series. Yeah. And he did that before he did the Scream series. So he's just kind of had a running theme with very much so enjoying to like making weird commentary movies. I forgot he also did Red Eye.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't ever remember seeing it, but I remember it being a really big deal, and that was kind of like put Cillian Murphy on the map, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that was a really big role for him.
Yeah.
I seem to remember that, yeah. Cool.
I will say he has, unfortunately, also done just a lot of shit. He also did They, which is like...
Oh, yeah! So...
It's not good.
I actually have a lot of memories of that. It was like one of the first horror movies that I remember like being kind of like a I guess being like a preteen. And like,
oh, you know what? I take it back. He only executive produced it, so they put his name on the cover and the title. He didn't direct it.
Wes Craven presents They. Yeah, I have this idea of They that is like a much cooler movie than what They actually is.
We should watch it and do an episode on it at some point.
They, them.
They, them. He, they.
Oh. But yeah, I guess that was generally the gist of like the major kind of thematic like content of the movie is all of that stuff having to do with like trauma and like trust.
Trust. Oh my god, especially because it's like I feel like the way in which they trust is a big part of it is also because of the fact that the film essentially gaslights you.
Interesting.
So I was talking a bit about it, like, because like I was pointing it out to you, not in a like, hey, you're dumb as shit, but in a like, I assume you're not as much into horror as I am.
Sure.
And there's a lot of, is that?
Well, I mean, like, okay, I'll say this. My first time through a movie, I never really like see what I'm like supposed to see. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, but yeah, like, so like honestly, it was also just, I just do that with movies in general. I just like pointing out things that are clever in movies because I'm like, look at this, it's so cool, isn't it nice? And then we don't have to watch it again, so I can show it to you. But like I pointed out, like, yeah, there's like the part where like, so one of the earlier scenes is we see the killer stepping down in a bathroom stall, and they specifically show his boots before he lowers his robes.
Yeah.
And then we have the scene where Matthew Lillard and Jamie Kennedy are talking about like possible suspects and how it fits into movies, and Jamie Kennedy is like, the dad is just a red herring. Like, the dad's gonna show up dead in the third reel, and I like that he shows up in the third reel, but he's alive, but it's still a red herring.
It's God.
But so like there's that level of gaslighting, and it's like, so that scene is him going like, the dad's just a red herring, like that's like the last line of the scene. I think it's like, the dad's a red herring. Then it goes to the police, and the police are talking about how they suspect it's the dad, and the sheriff, the one who's investigating it and is the one that's in control of information, is like, yeah, we just found out that the calls to Sydney and to Casey, the two women like who've been attacked, like, called by the killer, came from Sydney's dad's phone, and we haven't been able to find him. So like, I think this might be our guy. We got to look into it. And then he's like smoking, and he drops the cigarette and he stubs it out, and the camera makes sure to show you that it's the same boots that were shown in the bathroom scene. So that is supposed to be basically like telegraphing to an audience, and since this movie is basically speaking in the language of a Jamie Kennedy style, like, I'm a film guy, I know everything about movies, I can figure out who the killer is.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, the police chief is going to be the murderer. He's faking the evidence to make it look like it's Sydney's dad. Mm-hmm. The reason they show the boots is because we saw those boots earlier, and that's why we know. That's why he's doing this and this. And then it's just, that's the red herring. That just ends up being a red herring as well. And so using the line, the dad is a red herring, is then used as a way to set up another red herring. Because it's immediately after that line that they have that scene. And it's like, this movie, I love that it plays with with trust by gaslighting the audience and telling them things that they think they know, but that isn't actually true. God.
You know, it's really the type of shit that I would usually find so precocious.
It's one of those things where you really got to walk the line in what you're doing when you're making a movie like this, in my opinion, for it to work.
I strongly agree. And I think that the thing that kind of impressed me so much about this movie was it's like, its taste level, and like the stuff that it kind of was talking about, and kind of how it kind of came across toward those goals, and like B, the execution is like legitimately very, very solid. I'm really impressed by the script.
It's a good script work.
Yeah, and I was also really impressed by like the sort of we were watching the film and Jay kept pointing out that like, the point of like, part of the point of this film is that the killer is like a human, and can be like, you know, and if you kick them in the balls,
they're gonna go ow.
They're gonna go ow.
The part where Drew Barrymore hits him with the fridge, grabs a bottle, and chucks it directly into his crotch is so good.
It's really funny. All of the like, there's a lot of like really good physical comedy with this killer, which
even just like small things, like he tries to chase Sydney up the stairs and he trips.
Yeah,
like he just trips as he's going up the stairs because he's wearing a robe and running. Just like that level of thought of like, actually wearing something like that would make running upstairs really difficult.
It's a really good and And I'll say this again to kind of compare and contrast with Funny Games once again. This movie really carries like a huge sense of emasculation about like the horror obsession that comes with like both the two killer characters and also the Jamie Kennedy character, who kind of like the way he talks about horror, like he has this thing about horror movie rules, where like you have to be a virgin and like, or else like if you have sex, you're going to die. If you do drugs or drink beer, you're going to die. And that to me sounded a lot like incel shit.
Like,
you know what I mean?
Like the golden ones, sort of like, you must not masturbate and you must not drink and impurify your body.
Like, yeah, and just all of the sort of goofiness of the killer himself and his like methods, and just like the level of kind of like emasculation of just like, this is dumb.
Yeah.
Like this idea is dumb. What they're doing is dumb. It's just like re-traumatizing this girl for like a really petty, like personal, stupid reason. Yeah, I don't know. I liked the rigid rules that they set for themselves in the writing process.
No, I think a big part of it that also really helps with like all of that. And I know I kind of said this earlier, it's because it's a solid horror film and it's made by a guy who makes horror movies.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's why that sort of writing works, is because it's not writing that thinks it's above what it's deconstructing.
Absolutely.
It doesn't think it's above what it's deconstructing. The guy who wrote the movie is like a person who started a lot of these tropes because he was around in that time period. He made fucking Freddy Krueger. Like, he's aware of these tropes and he's like, hey, I'm going to use these to tell this story in a way that deconstructs them, but not because like I'm gonna come in here and be like Joss Whedon writing Cabin in the Woods. Like, you ever notice how there's always a jock and a nerd and a virgin and a stoner, and that only one of them can survive?
Yeah, I really like Cabin in the Woods self-referential stuff is just like, oh, there's always like a crocodile man or this kind of monster. It's all ideas that have been done before, man. And it like Scream's version of that is just like, hey, no one believes the woman or like, cares about, you know, what she has to say or like about her trauma or
it doesn't really matter. Everyone's just obsessed with like the spectacle of it.
Yeah.
Like even the bit of like the house is abandoned because the principal got killed and everyone wants to go see the body.
Yeah.
Like, just the idea of just like gore and violence being turned into spectacle, both in horror and also like in Gale Weathers being like this sort of like predatory reporter until like she lives through it. And then even at the end, she's like really excited to tell the story. Like, it's a very smart film.
Yeah.
And is using its tropes to tell a bigger story rather than just, you ever notice that horror movies are so formulaic? It's like the same thing happens every time.
It has like a little bit of that, but I think it uses those elements to like a really, really positive, sort of constructive end, that like kind of resulted in a movie that like, you know, it kind of has me being like, okay, like, you know, what do I like about horror movies? What do I guess people like about horror movies?
What do people get out of horror? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what's the point?
So while I do think the second one is very weak, you are going to love the opening to the second one. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you what it is right now.
Okay.
Because it's also
been I'm more than likely watching.
Yeah, because it's also been parried a million times. But it's basically the murders. So Gale Weathers has written a book about it, and it has been adapted into a movie. So the opening of it is like premiere night of it, and the theater is just like rambunctious, and it's like one of those like cult movie events where people are like yelling at the screen and stuff, and like dressed up as the killer. And the opening is just a like lower budget redoing of the first scene in Scream.
That's
including
so
adding
funny.
in a scene where she takes a shower and they see her, and so she gets like nude, and so she's running around in a towel. And then the first kills happen at the movie theater as people are like yelling at the screen as the Drew Barrymore knockoff character is getting stabbed to death while the woman in the theater is getting stabbed to death. And then she goes up on screen and is like bleeding out, dying in front of them. And everyone just like stops.
Oh my God.
Just like just that level of just like brilliant, just like there's so much layering that they do in that in like the whole series, and like callbacks and self-references, but like not in the cloying way, but in a very like, here's how we're going to like take this to the next way to tell a new story, horror film that uses the idea of a horror film against itself. I wanted to do a Film Critters episode in the future about like parody movies.
Yeah.
And the idea that they're the id. And I think comparing and contrasting Scream and Scary Movie is the perfect way to exemplify that.
Damn, that sounds really interesting.
Because Scream is a comedy, and then Scary Movie is just a lot of the same jokes, but told dumber.
Yeah, so I mean, like, it's a different kind of comedy. Like, a Scary Movie obviously is kind of like an airplane sort of slapstick kind of thing. And a lot of, like, I guess, raunchy humor or whatever.
Oh, Ghostface smoked weed!
I don't think I ever actually have seen, like, the uncut, like, first Scary Movie. But I've seen it on TV, and a lot of the second movie on TV, and a lot of the third movie. And I saw the fourth one also.
I've seen, I'm not gonna lie, I think I saw the third and or fourth one in theaters. I've seen at least one of them in theaters.
Yeah. The fourth one is like the War of the Worlds parody, like Steven Spielberg.
Is that the fourth or the third one?
That's the fourth one, because the third one's the Ring parody.
Oh, the Ring and the Signs parody.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, the fourth one is the...
The Aughts was a fucking hard time to live in. It was, oh my god.
The War of the Worlds and Saw parody.
Oh, Jesus. But yeah.
And The Village, I think, is also in that one. Like, they try to hide out from the aliens at The Village, or is that the Ring one?
No, because I think The Village is the fourth one, is when they parody.
Yeah.
Fuck this.
Yeah,
and, like, you know, hey, fuck. All right, point being, Scary Movie, it's like a really goofy, like, different type of comedy that's kind of like in your face, but like, I don't know, like, yeah, like exactly like you said, Scream has jokes in it.
It is already very funny. Like, while we were watching it, you were laughing out loud, like,
yeah,
a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it's kind of weirdly enough, it's kind of like Edgar Wright style of humor.
Oh yeah, no, I can see what you mean. Where it's very like dry humor, and the humor is in like...
Yeah, and the humor is all has to do with like what's diegetic and what's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like things that are kind of interdiegetic, if that's even a fucking phrase. But like I really liked the touch of sort of like her taking off her shirt in the upstairs, like, her bedroom, and like all the guys downstairs watching the movie being like, yeah, when like Jamie Lee Curtis like shows off her titties or whatever. And I don't know, like, yeah, there was a, like, this movie just has jokes in it. Like,
it's also like the joke of like near the end when she gets away from the killers and then she calls them and she's doing the voice thing.
Yeah,
and you just losing your mind at just how funny that is to just have the setup be, and now she's doing the same thing to them.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, I don't know. I had fun. I really like it.
It's a good. I'm really glad. I'm always worried when I show people movies I really like, but Scream is a personal favorite for a reason.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It's always weird because it's one of those movies I always forget that I really love, because I think the first time I saw it was like in high school, and I really liked it then too. But it's just literally every time I rewatch it, I like appreciate it more, especially because, like, you know, I learn more about film.
Yeah.
I will say there's some very 90s film scoring. Like very, very early, like late 90s, early 2000s film scoring.
I was loving it. I was really...
Until you pointed it out, I never noticed like the scene when they get to the high school and it's just like...
There was the song that started playing during like the ending credits that was like this sort of like club song. Like trance was like playing at one point. Oh, it was so... That's why I like noticed when the Halloween soundtrack like was kind of being used as both the movies, like both Scream's soundtrack and Halloween soundtrack.
Yeah.
In Scream.
That was such a, like, having the Halloween soundtrack as part of the diegetics of
yeah.
Because you were immediately like, is this the Halloween soundtrack? And I was like, how did you get like, that's what's going on here? And you're just like, because it doesn't sound like the rest of the soundtrack because it sticks out.
Because it's not like a weird like Yamaha keyboard like song.
Rest in peace, Wes Craven.
Yeah, rest in peace.
We'll never get a Scream 5.
We'll never get a.
And he was apparently considering it. That's like one of the things I'm always sad about because I don't want to be like, oh, it's disrespectful, but it's like no, I don't think literally anybody could make another Scream movie besides Wes Craven and not have it just be a piece of shit.
I kind of think you have to be the poet laureate. You know what I mean? Because like everybody else who tries it is like, it becomes obvious. Like if you are not in love with horror, it becomes really obvious in your writing.
Yeah, no, that's super true. We keep bringing up Funny Games, but like that's one of my biggest problems with Funny Games is it's obvious that he hates the genre of film that he's doing.
Yeah,
which ends up kind of working against. We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that. We will have plenty of chances to talk about. Yeah. So if you like horror movies and deconstructivism and you haven't seen Scream yet,
the fuck you doing?
What the fuck are you doing?
You should.
You definitely have because you listened to this.
Yeah, and I mean, like, really, like, another thing is, like, if this is your first time seeing it, and maybe you've mostly watched newer horror films, and you're like, I don't quite get what the appeal is so much. Not just like listen to everything we just said, but also consider like so many horror movies after Scream just ripped Scream off.
Yeah,
I feel
100%.
I feel like it's only been in the last few years, ironically, with the rise of stuff like Conjuring, that we're starting to see a return to sort of like pre-Scream horror.
Mm-hmm.
Because after like the success of Scream and the Scream series, so much horror just became like, oh, you got to be like goofy and self-aware, which to me really misses what the point of Scream was.
Yeah.
And I feel like Conjuring, because like I remember like watching Conjuring and being like, oh, this is like actually a good horror film in the style of like 70s and 80s horror. And I am actually really glad that it's seeing a renaissance of it, especially as like horror as a genre continues to evolve with stuff like Hereditary.
Yeah. I'm really interested in watching Oculus with you because it's a kind of a like relatively well liked movie. That I didn't watch the whole thing, and I really want to sit down and like watch it all the way through. But it's really strongly about like PTSD stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I'd love to. No, it sounds really good.
Yeah.
So I think that about wraps it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank
5 popcorn bags out of 5.
5 popcorn. I give this movie 5 screaming faces out of 5. 5screamemojis.com.
What would I rather have spent the $1 in the bargain bin on? Well,
I didn't even spend $1 in the bargain bin. This was in a mailbox outside.
What, you found it?
Well, okay, so I did not a mailbox. Like if you live in like a bougie ass neighborhood or around one, you know those like boxes that are like little libraries
where they build the cute little library house.
Yeah, like a library birdhouse, and people put books in them. I actually really like those, and I wish they were more white. They're in my neighborhood because I do live in a bougie ass. I don't live in a bougie neighborhood, but they are. I like them. I think they're really cute, and I was glad to see them out here. And I wish that they were more widespread because I think that's a really great resource idea.
It's cute.
Yeah. But anyway, someone put a bunch of DVDs in there, including Scream. So I was just like, oh, I don't have a copy of this, so I took it.
That's fucking awesome.
Actually, you know what? Hold on. I said that the second I said that until right now, I think I actually have the Scream trilogy on DVD.
Wait.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh my god. You robbed somebody else of the chance to own this
Scream.
DVD?
Do you want to borrow these 2 DVDs, by the way, and then you can watch them?
I mean, I'll probably be back over and we can just watch them.
Okay, yeah. And then Scream 4 is on Netflix.
That's fucking hilarious.
I like literally, as soon as I said that, I was like, wait, no, I think I actually own Scream 2 and 3. Well, now I have 2 copies of Scream.
Well, yeah, 2 copies of Scream. What could be better?
Anyway.
So, yeah, thank you for joining us so much. Stay tuned. We're going to upload another poll. We're not going to upload it.
It's going to go
post
up.
It.
Yeah, it's going to be
It's going to be there. You'll see it on your screen.
You'll see it. And the theme for next month,
guess what it is?
Just as a teaser, is if you put it together, that's right. Oscar nominees for Best Picture. No, it's not. No. It's going to be the same bit that we did this month, but it's going to be movies that I haven't seen that everyone is like, I can't believe you haven't seen that.
Absolutely.
All right.
Cool.
Well, this is Jay Verhat signing off.
This is Baru. Thank thank you so much for joining us for another lovely episode of Film Curtis Throws It Back.
Bye.
Bye.